I'm just delighted to be with you, and I want to look at the future, and it's my privilege and opportunity to travel in many countries, in 51 countries so far, and in the same 3 months it could take me to China, Russia, Kazakhstan on the one hand. It could take me to Hyderabad, Mumbai, Delhi, Madras, and Singapore and Sierra Leone and Nigeria and Brazil on the other. And as one dips in and out of these different territories, there are things that you begin to see, as indeed you do, because you are also, as a globalized institution, seeing this extraordinary unfolding story. I often say this: either we take hold of the future, or the future takes hold of us. Either we see the future as a series of trends coming towards us as 100 miles an hour, or we see the future as a series of possibilities that we create. And what I find exciting about this room is that in this room are history makers. You are making the future. You are designing processes, innovations, technologies. Indeed, we will be honoring many of these in just 48 hours' time. Spectacular, stepwise, revolutionary, some of them very radical improvements on existing processes, new markets, new opportunities, inventing the future. And so it's against that I want to look at some key trends. Not to say that these are just things we need to get ready for, but this is the context in which we can create future history. And one of the greatest risks of any organization is what I call institutional blindness. And you know, you can read all the books in the world. You can read leadership books, you can read books about competing for the future, you can you can listen to all the so-called gurus or experts, you can watch CNN, and you can read the Times of India from cover to cover. But the greatest risk, I believe, for your business unit is what I would call institutional blindness. It's when we have been in an industry for more than 6 weeks. When we've been, you know, I work a lot with bankers. And the trouble is, you can tell a banker from a long way away. And if you have a banker who's been in private banking for more than 5 years, then probably he or she spends most of their lives with other private bankers from other banks and private bankers inside their own bank. And the danger is that we miss something that is fundamentally important, which could present us with a massive new opportunity if we could just take off our glasses just for one moment. So I'm going to try to take my glasses off today, and I hope that you can too. I'm going to try to give you a more colorful view of the future than perhaps the reality. Please don't quote me outside this room. I don't necessarily believe everything I'm going to say. Okay. My purpose is to provoke us together, and we will learn a lot about the future. My opinion about the future is not so important. It's yours, and there will be many opportunities for you to indicate something of your own opinions. So I'm going to divide the future into 6 phases. They spell the word future, and I commend this as a method to you. It's very simple. You can apply this to your family. You can apply this to your business, to your community, to the state in which you live, and I hope you find it useful as a framework. You can structure the future actually in any way, but it's just important that you have a methodological framework so that we don't miss things out, or we keep looking at the same areas of the future all the time. So the first phase of the future, you see they all spell the word future, is fast, and it's to do, of course, with the speed of change. And I know that this is a fundamental value for you. It's one of the 5 key values, is this whole business of speed. And you know, leaders who act fast are going to win the day. You know that. You know that in Western Europe, for example, right now, or in America, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, in these countries, you will lose 30% of your market share in 30 seconds if your web page takes that long to load. That's yesterday, my friends. You tell me tomorrow. You might say, yes, that doesn't apply in Indonesia at the moment. It applies to some populations in Thailand. I agree. I'm just saying our world is changing incredibly quickly, and we are becoming very, very impatient for instant action in every way. The other day, I was in New York. I live in London. My grandmother was born in India, but I live in London. I was born in London, and I was in New York lecturing, and I was staying in a hotel with 4,522 stories and only 2 lifts. And it was I was pressed for time, and I arrived at the lift. There was 45 people waiting to get on the lift, and the lift button was lit, and I stood there. I don't know what you do in such a situation. I was very tempted to do something a little crazy. And I confess to you, I did. I pressed the lift button again. Not once, I pressed it 5 times. Now, okay, put your hands up. A little bit of confession time. A little bit of lights, please. Put your hands up if you too are tempted. I'm not saying that you ever would do such a crazy thing, but you are actually tempted sometimes to press the lift button more than once. Okay, all right. Okay, so I am not so crazy. But can I ask another question? Who actually does press the lift button more than once? I mean, it's not just that you are tempted, but you confess that actually you've done it. My friends, I mean, what are we doing here? I know that even Bill Gates cannot get that lift to come any faster by pressing that lift button more than once. And yet I do it. And what we begin to learn is this, that in the future, you can be surrounded by the world's best business thinkers, the world's best analysts, the most sophisticated engineers, the most incredible, dynamic, intellectual giants of the world. But when we are under pressure, we all behave totally irrationally. And if we learn nothing about the future, we need to understand that underneath every business process we have, the Six Sigma and everything else as well, the Kaizen way and all the other things that you are doing, at the end of it all, we need to face the fact that we are ordinary human beings made of flesh and blood, and we, the people we lead, are strange. We are emotional, we are passionate, and we need to understand how people actually feel. And that's true of those who buy from us, it's true from our end customers, it's true of our customers' customers, that emotion is incredibly important. And we see this in another area. We see it in the area of what I call wild cards, low probability, but potentially high impact events. These are very, very unlikely things. If one of these happened to you, you would think that, that fate had delivered you a very unpleasant surprise. And yet, if we think a little further, we understand that in your business unit, there could be 300 or 400 such wild cards, each of which has a 1% risk of happening every single year, which means the simple mathematics is that every year at least 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 very unlikely things could happen in your business environment which will affect your business. And these can be upside opportunities or downside risks. What it means is that the days of having only one strategy are over. What it means is that if we are to succeed, we need to think faster than events can change. And the world can change faster than you can get your own board together to have a board meeting. It could be a major currency change in the United States, in the dollar, which means suddenly a major acquisition becomes much more manageable in another country, which is tied to the dollar. It could be a worry about bird flu sending the markets tumbling just like SARS did. It could be all kinds of rare possibilities. It could be something like another subprime crisis in the United States, something like this. It could be, you're going to hear this afternoon from a former Minister of Finance in Thailand of what it was like to be a member of the government here in 1997. These are wild cards. But if we develop teams which are sophisticated, they're always thinking about possibilities, they are always ready for whatever life comes with, and they have packaged together various types of risk and opportunity, they've done the thinking ahead, then you will always outgun the opposition. You will win every single time. And that's why we don't believe market research. You see, if we go back to these wildcards, we know from history that the impact of almost all of these events is an emotional one. It's the subprime crisis is an example, SARS another example. And if we want to understand the future, then we need to go beyond the numerical data and try to understand the psychological framework of the world in which we live. And as I say, that's why market research can be so deceptive, because you can do all the market research you like, but if the customers suddenly change how they think and feel, then you can get left behind. I'll give you an example. My mother is quite traditional. She is not against technology, but she doesn't like it very much. And she used to think that the devil himself lived in a mobile phone, and that she did not want to do email. She thought that anyone who would look at their bank balance online was a bit of an idiot. And then one day I got a phone call. And she said, "Since your father died, it's been difficult because my friends are now all on email and SMS, and they make all their social arrangements these ways, and then they write a letter to me, and I get it 6 months later. So I need to go online." So I took her down, and we bought her a Windows XP computer. She wanted one with broadband. She didn't know what it was, but she wanted it. She knew she wanted to do it all in the garden, so it had to be wireless. And we came back with a Skype and other things, and a headset and a camera in the screen. And we came back with a 3G video phone and everything else. And the following day, she was so excited, she had sent her first email. And then she said, "But Patrick, there's a big problem with my bank." I said, "Oh." "Yes," she said, "every time I use my phone to call them, they can't see me, and I certainly can't see them." And what had happened was my mother had jumped 35 years and left her bank behind. Because her bank had always asked her things like, "Will you want to manage your bank account online?" And she said, "Don't be ridiculous." They'd asked her things like, "Would you be wanting to do telephone banking?" And she said, "What's that?" And then suddenly, she'd moved on. And how long will it take them to catch up with my mother? What do you think? I think maybe it could take them a whole year to make the right decision in the board. It could take them another 2 years to roll the system out. So they will be 3 years behind my mother, at least, maybe 5, maybe 10. And by the time they have caught up, my mother will have gone somewhere else. So the lesson is this: listen to my mother, please. Otherwise, she will get extremely angry and frustrated. Listen to the frustrations, the emotion that she has in how she deals with the bank today. But when we're thinking about the longer-term future, we need to get close to my mother where she is now. Then we need to build a vision of where she will be in the future, or could be, and then try to imagine a vision of where the world could be, and then imagine my mother in there, and then try to get a little closer. So as I say, the future will be about emotion. It's an unescapable fact. And we see emotion, too, in leadership. We see emotion in the issue of trust. If you are in financial services today, as some of you are, if you're in telecom, as I know you have a very exciting group of people here today, responsible perhaps for a quarter of the capital of this organization, then trust is absolutely vital. And trust can be lost in a moment. It's very unfair. So reputation is going to be everything in the future, and that means values are even more important than we thought. I'm going to show you a short video, which is Reebok's suggestion about how we should build trust at work to deliver great performance.
When we asked Reebok to send us Terry Tate, some people thought we were crazy. But I'm a firm believer in paradigm breaking, outside-the-box thinking.
Hey, buddy.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, Mitch!
And since Terry's been with us, our productivity has gone up 46%. We're getting more from our employees than ever before.
You know you need a cover sheet on your TPS reports, Richard! That ain't new, baby!
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Janice!
But what's really impressed me is how Terry's become part of the Felcher family.
Yeah, baby!
He fits right in here.
That's a long-distance call, Doug!
To be honest, I wish Reebok sent us 10 Terry Tates.
You want to play games, Gene? Well, when it's game time, it's pay time, baby! Woo!
Well, I know that's a bit of a joke, but I just wanted to think about this issue of emotion in our leadership too. In this fast-changing world, people need solid leadership which knows where it's going, that is quietly confident, not proud, humble enough to listen, to be constantly learning, but actually deeply engaging with the individuals that we're leading. And you're going to hear more about this issue of leading, having a quality of leadership which doesn't even come from the hierarchical position, but it comes from the very character of who we are, and the more rapidly the world changes, the more important this kind of character in leadership is. Fast, urban. Urban is about demographics, fashions, and fads. It's about this incredibly exciting moment in human history which will never be repeated. It's about 1 billion children, all of whom are under the age of 15 right now, of which a great number are in India, maybe 200 million of them in primary school age in India. It's about the great challenges in terms of education, not just in primary school level, which I know is a big concern of this wonderful corporate and social responsibility initiatives here. But it's also a very exciting issue in terms of market development, because all of these people, these children, will be adults very soon. They will be looking for work, they will be consuming things, they will have aspirations about the future. And in that, we see a massive difference, of course, between the future of India and the future of China. If you go to Beijing, for instance, who here has been to Beijing recently? Did you notice any children playing in the park? No. Where are they? Well, they're not living in Beijing. Partly because they're not being born in Beijing. Partly because very few children are being born at all. Compared to India, say, you cannot walk down any street without falling over 100 very small children. Why? Because India is a much younger organization, a much younger community. And that is going to be one massive big problem in India, in China, I mean, quite soon. Over the next 20 years, this is going to be a huge challenge, a social challenge, a political challenge, an economic challenge, a war for talent challenge, and it's not easy to fix. Even if the one-child policy was completely relaxed tomorrow, how many years would it be before we would see a difference in the number of graduates coming through university? The answer? 25 years. So, it's a complex challenge, and it will give India a significant competitive advantage over the next 30 to 35 years. And yet, at the same time, in China, we are seeing monumental changes. These cities are not going to get smaller because of no babies. The cities are going to explode. Just look at the official government forecasts. You know this data. But every time I think about it again, my head explodes. 23 million new people every year are being moved from rural areas into the largest cities in China as part of government policy. It's being encouraged. And in the middle of this are some of the greatest infrastructure challenges that the world has ever seen. And on top of that, we put similar urban movements in India, populations which I know some of the bigger cities in the world tend to stabilize at around 11 million, and then they tend to seed more satellites. But nevertheless, these big 11 million cities have a huge maturing to do. and there's infrastructure needs everywhere you look. Very exciting if you are in any kind of infrastructure work, and of course also daunting if you are into the business of pricing commodities. And then because we are seeing this concentration in cities, all kinds of other very interesting developments are, of course, you don't need to be a prophet to see them. One is this increasing specialization of the retail business. Let's think about it. I wonder how big you think organized retail could get just in India. I started to think about this. I mean, does it need much faith to think that there could be at least 150,000 branded outlets in India alone? Really quite soon. That's probably very conservative by 2025. Maybe by 20... What do you think? Put your hands up if you agree with me that this is almost inevitable. 150,000 branded stores, not just the 400 which you have opened in the last week, 6 weeks, 6 months, not just the 5,000 you will have soon. Put your hands up if you think that's likely to be right, 150,000 by 2025. Put your hands up if you think I've understated it. It could be significantly more than that. I'm talking about mom and pop shops that are standardized, that are affiliated, that are co-branded, maybe owned by the mom and pop, but it's like a franchised out. So we are ready, right on the edge of an extraordinary revolution. And as the middle classes become more demanding and more sophisticated and looking for ever greater ranges, the opportunities for converting those into much larger footprints in each town or city is very, very exciting. And as I say, at the same time, we've got challenges of commodities, whether it's oil, gas, copper, aluminium. We've got issues of national security and well-being here. You know, and I know, that this is highly political now. For China to be able to secure its own supplies of copper, to be able to be sure that it can control its own supply of oil from outside its own borders. And so we're going to see more big investments by so-called sovereign funds, where the real entity behind the conglomerate is actually the state itself. By the way, have you thought about this? How many dollars does China own already in government bonds and the rest? It's over $1 trillion. How many weeks or months will it be on current trends before it becomes $2 or $3 or $4 trillion? Not long. And by the way, if you were a team that suppose you had $1 trillion of Chinese money and it was your responsibility to invest it, do you think, as a team, that you would keep $1 trillion in government bonds? No way. What would be the first thing you'd be starting to do with all of that money? You would put it for productive purposes, of course. And so we have to say, I'm sorry if it's politically insensitive, but we have to say that the Chinese investment policy is hard to understand at the moment. It doesn't make much sense. I know they can't pull it out of dollars. If they do, what happens to the rest of the dollars they own? It falls to nothing. So they have to keep most of it in dollars. Poor old China. But at least they could do something more productive with it. And so you can be sure that they will. Actually, I would do something else. If I was part of this team with you, I would be saying, why didn't we go borrow some more? Why didn't we use our $1 trillion and borrow 3 and make a leveraged $4 trillion fund and really have some fun? Now, if we would start thinking about these kinds of numbers, you could see that we could have a $3 trillion fund quite soon, leveraged with another 8 or 9, and maybe a 10, 11, or 12 trillion dollar sovereign fund that can go and say, I have some of that, please. I have some of that. And what is one of the first things I would want to buy? What is one of the assets in America that is very, very low valued right now? Well, one of its property, isn't it? It's distressed property that's being repossessed. I'd have some of that. I'd have some of all kinds of things. So we can expect China sovereign funds to do all kinds of very interesting things in the market. And when that happens, what will be the reaction of America? I wonder. It will depend on what they try to buy. If they try to buy JFK Airport, Well, the Dubai government tried to buy just one port recently in America. That was tough enough, and so on. So we'll see all kinds of plays here. And one of the biggest plays the Chinese will be doing is securing the supply lines for the economy for the future. And in the same way, we will see all kinds of other forces taking place in things like the chemical industry. Just take Europe. In my part of the world, we have 4,300 small chemical companies, and yet 15 of them are controlling 98% of production, and the rest, we don't really know what they do. They are very small. And there is going to be, without doubt, a huge consolidation in the EU chemical industry. I suspect that the same will happen in India, in China, in Vietnam, everywhere else. And as this happens, other opportunities will emerge. You see, once again, if we look at the European Union, I'm sure you are much more efficient in India than we are. But in the European Union, we have a disaster. You know something I discovered. We have large numbers of trucks, and they pass each other on the same road, going in different directions, carrying identical product. Identical. It's the same, exactly the same stuff, made in one factory to going off to one other process. And over here, we have another factory selling the stuff over here. I would not be surprised if the same thing is happening in India as well. In fact, I can't believe that it isn't. So you have some examples where you have trucks going from Mumbai to Delhi, carrying identical product, and crossing along the way, some going from Delhi to Mumbai. Now, if that is the case, then you have, as we have, an extraordinary opportunity especially through industry consolidation, to start developing exchanges. And this is happening right now in Europe, and it's an environmental thing too. I was with a whole load of people from the chemical industry recently, and they calculated that just in Europe, which is a tiny group of countries, only 500 million people compared to you, but just in Europe, they could save 100 million kilometers of truck driving with a small swapping scheme with only 5 people, costing maybe 100,000 euros a year to run. And it would save maybe 10, 20, 30 million euros a year straight away. Talking of Europe, my area of the world is dying. You know that. While we have 1 billion children in other parts of the world, in the European Union, we are struggling to produce 1 child from 8 great-grandparents. That's why Germany is becoming extinct. Germany's population on current trends will halve from 80 down to 40 million, 40 down to 20, 20 down to 10, and 10 to 5, and 5 to 2.5. That's the logic. You see, the maths is very simple. Unless people live forever with medical advances, then you either have to make more people, you have to breed them, or you have to import them from somewhere else. And if you're not importing enough, then your population goes down. And when you have only 1.3, 1.4 children per couple, then the population halves in every generation. That's the math. So that is why in countries like mine, we have 2 policies on immigration. One is the official one from the government, which is these things are carefully controlled. And the other is unofficial, which is let as many come as possible and just don't count them when they arrive at the airport. And if you don't believe me, it's absolutely true. And in this way, we have managed to suck in, without anybody noticing, we've sucked in 1 million new citizens, mainly from Poland, in the last 3 years. And we will suck in another 1 million in the next 3 years, and maybe another 1.5 million in the following 3 years after that. And as a result, it's possible that our population may actually grow. Our resident population is becoming extinct. But our economy is actually growing as a result of immigration. So huge forces are happening across the world, fascinating times, and with it is coming great complexity. Because you might think in the old days, oh yes, Britain will outsource some of its banking to India, or outsource some IT to Poland. Well, maybe not. In fact, the cost of flights is so cheap now that the Polish workers can come to London on Monday morning, and they fly home on Friday night. They are never resident in London. They always live in Poland, but they just come to work. They commute on a flight which is 25 euros each way. So very complicated things are happening, fascinating changes. And in the middle of it all, there are other things too. 75% of all the wealth of the UK and America is owned by those over the age of 65. And you know, of course, that the most important characteristic of those over the age of 65 in India, in Indonesia, in Thailand, in Australia, in America, in France, the most important characteristic of all those over the age of 65 is this: 65% of 65-year-olds are women. 75% of 75-year-olds are women, and 85% of 85-year-olds are women, and 180% of 100-year-olds are women. Now, if you have done the math so far, you will understand something, which is that the whole of America, most of America, and most of the UK is owned by very old women. Now, although I'm laughing a bit, this is significant. Huge wealth in an older age groups, mainly female. But actually, if we look at the younger age groups, something strange is happening too. In Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, America, and I suspect in Delhi too, most of the online bank accounts that are opened each week are opened by men. But almost all the actual money that's used to pay bills are paid by women. So the women are ruling the online world. In fact, women in most countries buy most of the life insurance policies online. They buy most of the books on Amazon. They book most of the online holidays. They buy most of the groceries. In fact, I don't know what men do online. Let's pass on. Actually, if you're looking for a new market, you could look at women over the age of 90 in Italy, because there will be 1 million of them waiting for your services by 2026. But more importantly, these 90-year-old women will fix the results of every election for the foreseeable future. Can you imagine that? And the same is happening in Germany, Spain, Portugal, and China. Fascinating. You might say, well, China doesn't have an election system like India's. I know. I'm just saying things are changing. In fact, demographics, my friends, is the biggest key to understanding explosive new markets and major challenges for the future. By the way, can we stop the TikTok of the... I know some of you are interested in this, whether it's in life insurance or just for your personal lives. Perhaps we can. There's already a drug on the market that can do this. Actually, it's not on the market, it's in development. The good news is that it works in mice and rats, and it lowers blood pressure permanently in 4 weeks. It restores the elastic of the arteries, and it does the same for the skin, all over the body. But the bad news is it doesn't really work in humans yet. My friends, what an amazing drug that would be if we had it. And we could be closer than you think. We already have the technology to take some cells from the bones in your body and put them into your own heart, and to rebuild your own heart function after a heart attack and get up to 85% recovery, just using your own stem cells. And we can do the same in animals after stroke. We can restore brain damaged areas using an animal's own cells. These things are extraordinary. I am a physician in my first training, a doctor of medicine, and you know, even 5 years ago, things like this would have seemed total nonsense. But our world is changing so fast. Scientists are already talking about the ability to regrow hairs inside the ear, to restore the hearing of people who are losing it. And every person over the age of 65 has some hearing loss. So this is a massive market. We will copy animals that don't get old. Did you know that? That some animals don't seem to show any normal signs of aging. They die of infection, they get eaten, they get attacked, but they do not die of getting old. Whereas most of you here, the reasons you see the doctor are for reasons because you're getting old. They're different from the reasons your children see a doctor. And yet we discover that some kinds of whales don't show signs of getting old, some kinds of rockfish, and then there are animals like turtles and parrots which age very slowly. And it is possible that it's the same gene switch which is working inside these different creatures. And if we could find that gene, which we will probably in the next 5 years, then we could be on the way to discovering something quite extraordinary about the tick-tock of your body clock. Amazing. Now, we're not going to do it tomorrow. And you say, some of you are saying, oh, that's a pity, and others are saying, thank God for that. Because you see, when you think about the future, it touches us. And one of the things we start to think about is, what kind of world do we really want? What kind of world would it be if the very wealthy could live till they are 140, and the very poorest are still dying on average at the age of 37? Vast urban tribalism. Tribalism is the most powerful force in the whole world. It's more powerful than atomic bombs. It's more powerful than the entire military might of all the biggest superpowers. It's when one group says we are us, and when another group says you are them. Tribalism can be religious. It can be political. It could be as simple as Giorgio Armani tribe. It could be the Calvin Klein tribe. It could be the McDonald's tribe. It could even be your own tribe. And how many tribes are there represented inside this room? A huge number, the different businesses and so on. And when we have great inequalities between some tribes and other tribes, then of course we have a recipe for instability in our world. And this, I believe, is one of the greatest moral challenges that we face, is to see ways in which we can deal with this difficult situation. And yet tribalism is the most powerful positive force that we know. Tribalism gives us culture, teams, identity. Tribalism allows us to celebrate the 6,500 languages that are still spoken in India today. Tribalism allows us to celebrate poetry and music, a family, neighborhood, and community. Tribalism makes me proud to be a Londoner, and perhaps you to be someone who was born in Madras. Tribalism gives us friendship. Tribalism gives us identity, and tribalism gives us people movements. Tribalism gives us teams. Tribalism gives us brands, or rather, every brand creates a tribe. Every successful organization is a tribe, and the more powerful you become as a movement of collection of businesses, the more powerful your tribes will be. And you are a tribe of tribes. This is a perfect tribal event. And one of the most exciting things in leadership is for us to understand the difference between leading a team, 10, 12 people, and leading a tribe, which could be as many as 88 or 188,000 people, all inspired by the same values, gripped by the same vision, filled with some of the same passions, going towards a common goal, making a difference in ways they believe is right and fun, interesting and challenging, and then you have a people movement. And building the Aditya Birla tribe, well, of course, there are many ways of doing it, and you are doing it incredibly fast. We see tribalism in things like the growth of microbanking. One of the most exciting things I have ever seen was this group of women in Delhi who themselves have become the board of a bank. They were the first group of 14 women, all underwriting each other's loans of just a few rupees. And the schemes have grown, and this particular group is now lifting over 40,000 families out of absolute poverty at amazing speed. It's a fantastic thing. But it spreads tribally, because these groups are, each one is a tribe of 14 women, and they recruit each other through their own communities. We see it, tribalism, in the growth of energy supply and conflicts between Russia and France or Germany and other countries because of worries about which tribe will own another tribe's energy supply, which tribe will own another tribe's water supply. So we see tribalism in utilities, we see tribalism in the YouTube phenomenon. Who here has watched a YouTube video in the last year? Okay, you know what? In many countries I speak to now, everyone has watched a video from YouTube in the last week. It's growing very fast. YouTube has become the largest TV station in the whole world. And it was started just by two young men with no marketing budget, with just two computers in a bedroom in their house. They have just been given a check by Google for $1.63 billion, which is not bad. But they are forming tribes. It's a TV station of tribes. Google allows us to find our own tribe instantly. However tiny your tribe is, you will find someone in it. And Google, therefore, and search engines allow us to create new tribes, to market to new tribes instantly. And these tribes themselves are gaining huge power. Look at this. This is TripAdvisor.com. I don't know if anybody has been to TripAdvisor's site. But you know, if I type in the name of this hotel, I might get immediately the hotel's own website somewhere, the paid listings which say this is the best hotel in Bangkok, of course, and I might see some comments. Now, these are not comments about this hotel, but imagine that they were. Imagine these were the second and third listings on Google underneath the official site. So you've got three choices. You can click on the official site, which tells you all the amazing reasons why this hotel is the best in the whole of the world. Or you can click on a positive comment, or you can click on a negative comment by someone who stayed in the hotel last week and nearly died, they say. Now, I want you to put your hands up if you would click first on the hotel's official site to learn the truth about the hotel. Put your hands up if you would click first on the first of those two comments, the positive one. Put your hands up if you would click first on the negative comment because you're worried about where you've been booked into. My friends, you have just shown me something incredibly important about the future, more powerful than I could possibly have shown. You have shown me the truth, which is that in the online world, advertising is dead. Why? Because this poor hotel can spend $1 billion every week advertising, promoting itself. But you have shown me that you will not be impressed at all. You will not even click on that site. Why? Because if you can find another user, an ordinary human being, who is not paid by that hotel, that has made a comment, that you will trust that user more than the hotel, right? So it's the death of branding. It's the death of marketing, aggressive marketing. It's the birth of revelation, the birth of information. In fact, advertising becomes information. Here are the facts about us. And the online community then becomes revelation. So we have the official site here, which says, these are our benchmarks. These are our customer promises. This is what we aim to do every single time. And then here is revelation. This is whether they are consistent with the standards they have set. And in the middle, well, the advertising agencies in the world don't know where to go, I promise you. So, we're seeing the same thing happen in financial services, having sites growing up where, for instance, you can get, there are already 1 million sites offering instant quotes. And if you don't get the best quote, guaranteed to be correct, within about so many minutes, then you get a $5 check, which is pretty good. Insurance itself, actually, is going to grow enormously. Just in India alone, let alone Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, China. This is a very, very exciting market, especially in countries where most insurance has been sold as an investment rather than as a risk product. And we have opportunities for a threefold growth straight away if we look at benchmarking against more mature economies. By the way, the client wants a robot, a human being, not a robot. You know, sometimes I phone up a telecom company, and they say, press 1 for accounts, press 2 for customer service, press 3 for faults. I get really annoyed. Put your hands up if you also get annoyed by these systems. Yes, my friends. You see, I know, you see, now I have another confession. I want you to confess to me the truth. Please don't be embarrassed. I won't tell anyone. Put your hands up if your company somewhere uses such a system. Please, come on, let me see. Please. Come on, no, yes, your hand should be up too, sir. I can tell, yes, I know you're, come on, you're hiding away, Ladia. I see your hand is not raised. Listen, my friends. See, we can get tangled up in the future. You were expecting me to come along and say, you know, by 2003 and 2013, all of us will have 50 robots in our houses. I haven't come to tell you that kind of future because it's not the truth. I've come to bring a reality check about the future. And here's another reality check. Firstly, the future is about emotion. And secondly, it's about systems which serve people. And, you know, you have told me, what you've told me is this, that in your opinion, anyone that designs call center systems like that, or buys them and installs them, should be regarded as a criminal. It should be a criminal act, and they should be put in prison, and you throw away the key. Yeah, yes, that's right. You agree with me now. The same person now. Okay. So why are we doing it? When we are customers, we say these things make us angry, they make us passionate, they make us so fed up. They make us think, if that is how they treat us, why should I bother to be with them? And yet we do exactly the same thing to our own customers. I tell you this, the quickest way to destroy your tribe is to use such a system. It does not cost much to answer the phone. And for some of you, your only human contact, or your main human contact with your customer, is when they are really in trouble. The delivery is late, the product was the wrong one, there is a big crisis in the billing, and they really want a human being straight away. So let's use technology. Let's use it to capture the idea of the caller, so that when I call back, they say, hello, is that Dr. Dixon? Yes? Ah, you're calling about your Toshiba PC. Huh? Yes. I know you were talking to Jerry just about 20 minutes ago. He's just slipped out. But if you wait 3 seconds, I have the details now on the screen. You see, Jerry sits opposite me. I have the FedEx carriage number for you. Would you like it? I say, yes, please. I think it's being delivered tomorrow at 3 o'clock. That was what you wanted to know? Thank you very much. I promise you I will be selling that company all over the world for nothing. Why? Because they treat me as a human being and I became part of their family. So let's use technology wisely. Fast, urban, tribal, universal. I'm not going to spend so long on these other phases. Universal you know all about. It's the world getting smaller, seamlessness and all the rest. It's about the invasion of global brands. It's about McDonald's everywhere. And at the same time, as we become more universal, we become more tribal. Because the more universal we are, the more we begin to worry that we are losing our own identity. And I know this is very important for you as a whole group, that when you enter a new market, you don't just say, this is the way we do it. You actually listen to the culture, you come alongside the local people, especially in your mergers and acquisitions, and you try to think carefully about how to engage with people. And you know, often when I'm dealing with some of the largest multinationals, I hear them on their executive education programs. It's always the same. They say, we want to have a program about one bank, one conglomerate, one institution. And I say, what is this all about? And they say, well, because, you know, you either eat more or you get eaten. And we want to build up our footprint and get economies of scale. And now we've done it. The analysts look at this and they want to see 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 20. And if it doesn't equal 20, then they want to break us up. So we are in a very strange world right now, where analysts put pressure on public companies to grow by adding more bits, and strip out inefficiencies, consolidate, and all the rest. And then the moment you've grown, they want you to split, and break it all up. And the people who make all the money all the way to the bank are the banks and the lawyers. And they're doing very well out of it. But I tell you this, you know that 70% of all mergers result in loss of shareholder value. And why is that? I'll tell you why. It's because of the previous phase, tribalism. It's because the numbers looked great on the Excel spreadsheet, but no one tried to work out how a Japanese and French company would live together in the same team. And the moment they made the announcement, some of the best people started to leave outside the door, and even by the time they revalued the companies on the day they actually decided to put them together, a lot of the value had disappeared. So we need to be very careful how we put these deals together in a quest to build these one big organizations. Globalization, yes, it's about, of course, movement of goods and services. And what's fascinating to me is just how cheap these movements have become. Or rather, how expensive land movement has become. In my country, it costs more to move a lorry, a container, 150 kilometers than it does to move the same container from London all the way to Shanghai. For me, that is truly shocking. And it's an example of why it is, as you know, that in the future, every one of your factories that is within 20 kilometers of a port will win a competitive advantage, a significant competitive advantage, over every one of the factories of your competitors that's 150 kilometers from a port. And my friends, a factory that is 1,000 kilometers from a port is over. It's very, very hard to compete in the tomorrow's world because the shipping costs relative to ordinary road freight is falling so low, especially in countries like India and the UK, where the infrastructure on the roads is getting so crowded that it's hard to get these just-in-time deliveries. So we're seeing more and more of these container ports built. We are back to the age of sail. I remember learning about this at school. I remember because Britain was a great maritime economy. I was told that the whole of my country's future was built on the fact that everything was carried in ships or on barges in water. But we're back to it again. It's strange. And that is why in my country there will be so many container ports that it's almost like the postman going around. Every 20 miles, another container. Every 20 miles, another two and another one. And another 20 miles, we reshuffle the whole ship in 24 hours. Another 20 miles, and another one comes. Because the technology is so incredible for using one robot, one human being, to completely strip out 45,000 containers, reshuffle them on the deck, and put them all back in 5 ships in 24 hours. Amazing. Extraordinary. So access to sea is going to be mission critical in every manufacturing and distribution process. Now you could say, Patrick, you have exaggerated. The reason why it's so cheap to move goods from London to Shanghai is there's 5 billion empty containers going that way. That's true, and they're now being used for reverse exports, and of course what we're putting in them is anything we don't want. So China is eating our plastics. In fact, 1/3 of all our UK recycled waste paper and plastic is going 8,000 miles to China. Extraordinary. It's just the start. It's partly because of the hunger for commodities. Convergence, well, that's also part of the universal thing. So you've got a mobile phone that's becoming a camera, the camera that's becoming a personal organizer, and so on. But while everyone talks about convergence, I happen to think that all innovation is divergent. It's about doing things differently. If you think about telecom and technology, most people use their devices for only one thing. And although there's great talk about everything converges onto one platform and all the rest of it, in fact, the truth is rather more complicated. How many of you have these? You have more than one remote control in your living room at home. How many of you have bought one of these, a universal remote? They only cost 2 rupees, half of $1 or something. And yet none of us use them. Why? Because we don't believe in convergence. Actually, in our homes, we have a deep emotional attachment to all of these things. Once again, I say, let's have a reality check about the future. We can easily get lost in some analysts' processes, without understanding that simply human beings want to live. And they want things to be done reliably, quickly, and simply. Every mobile phone company has the opportunity to become a big bank. And every bank should be really worried about mobile phones. Let me explain. You see, in your back pocket today, you have 5 or 6 credit cards, and many of them now have chips inside them. These chips are RFIDs, and I know you invest in this technology a lot. Radio frequency identification devices. These grains of sand which have entire computers in them. Hardware, software, microprocessors, permanent memory. These grains of sand will last 100 years in the environment. They suck power out of the room in which we are living now. They take radio waves there, and then they can store data permanently with their operating systems and so on. And these grains of sand are not only in the credit cards, of course, they are now in the mobile phones. And that's interesting. What it means is that in future, we don't need the credit cards. We just throw them away. I did a lecture recently, and Visa came up to me and said, "We're very pleased about our new technology we want to show you." I think they were hoping that on the platform I would talk about it. So I am. Here it is. And they said, "All you do is you go close to the bank, you get money." I said, "Great. I can do that with my phone. Why do I need you?" Imagine that American Express starts to do a deal with you as a telco, and you manufacture or you develop a new trading platform which allows a next-generation phone to work like this. You go into the petrol station, the gas station, you go into a restaurant, or you're paying the school fees for your children. It doesn't matter. Bloop, SMS comes to your phone. You put your thumb on for biometrics on the screen, so it knows who you are just as much as the American customs knows who you are, okay? It's infallible. One thumb, blump, we know who you are. You press the pay button to pay, and you can authorize safely a 100,000 euro transaction. And who captures that, my friends? It's not American Express. Who will loan you the money for it? You, of course. Who will charge you the interest? Who will be charging the interest? It will be your organization on such a transaction. And the amounts are extraordinary. Just look at this. In the UK alone, we're talking about $1 trillion of transactions a year by 2010. A credit card debt loaned on the back of these transactions of $100 billion at an interest rate which is running at 10% higher than the Bank of England rate. And even if you had only 1% of incentives on this, it's a $400 billion market. So you can see that the days of selling phones is over. It's history. Why would you bother to sell a phone? You'd be paying people to take your phones. You'd be saying, "Please promise me, here is a mobile phone. Use it as much as you like for data, mobile phone, video, everything. Please, please use it with our gift. It's our gift to you. Just promise me one thing. Please cut up in half your American Express card. And if you do that, then the world will be free." And this is something which every bank should be scared about, and every telecommunication company should be dreaming about. It's the greatest possible shift in financial services that you could imagine, and it's right on the doorstep now for the first company in the world that really seizes the opportunity. And I tell you, I'm not seeing anyone who's really got hold of it yet. And it doesn't stop there. You know that a significant amount of the income of some Indian communities happens from places like Dubai, right? It's the same in Mexico from Miami. It's called remittances. And these remittances can be responsible for at least 4 to 5% of GDP of many nations. It's when the son earns in one country and he's paying back home in another. And the telco companies have a fantastic opportunity here. Vodafone is already doing it. You have 2 copies of the same SIM. You own one and your son owns one. Your son is in London and he's sending money home. And all that happens is he's buying minutes on his mobile phone and you're spending them. And you spend them to buy rice, you spend them to buy a car. You can spend them on whatever you like. They are currency, they can be traded, and what is more, there is no foreign exchange transaction, no banking losses, no control, and no taxes. It's a money system made from heaven itself. and it's sitting there within the telco system, ready to be exploited, and indeed is already. It's happening already. Virtual teams, virtual companies, where does this universal outsourcing story go? Well, I am worried about it, actually. And let me tell you that many of my biggest multinational clients are already questioning the economics. Why? Because they're finding they're having to pay 40% higher salaries at the top end in Hyderabad than last year. In India, it's up to in China, it's up to 100% jumps every 12 months at the top end. Now, that's very good news if you are at the top end, but it's not so good news if you're thinking of outsourcing to save money. Because if you are saving money on a 30, 40, 50% differential, it doesn't take long for that to disappear. So some of my clients have done the maths, and they think that to start outsourcing now will be crazy, because in 3 to 4 years' time, they will have to bring it back. And already some of that's starting to happen. So it won't change overnight, but it's going to move quite a lot. It might move to Pakistan, for example, rather than to Hyderabad, because Pakistan, as you know, is 40%, 50% cheaper, certainly in terms of knowledge management processing. And we'll certainly need new tools to manage it. Okay, fast, urban, tribal, universal, radical. Radical, these last two phases won't take long. Radical is about the death of politics and the rise of single issues. What do I mean by that? Well, in the old days, we might have said it was socialism and capitalism that would have controlled the future of Calcutta. But now it's become more complicated. Those kind of ideological battles are perhaps being fought in a different way, and very emotional those battles are too, but they could be much more complex. It could be issues relating to how air pollution should be tackled, what the taxes on carbon should be, what the standards of worker safety should be, what should be done about money laundering. I'm thinking about, it could be in the United States, these kinds of single issues are being debated. It could be here in Bangkok. It could be in China. Very, very sensitive issues, some of them. Child labor, all kinds of things, using of bribes and so on. And the biggest single issue, of course, is sustainability. And I mean that in the widest sense. I don't just mean the sustainability of our planet. I mean the sustainability of your family and your children, of your marriage, of your relationships, of your physical health, of your emotional well-being, of your very soul. These are profound things that touch us when we think about the future. But within the sustainability concern, which is the third millennial concern, of course, the global warming is the big one. And global warming, whatever you may think about the science, you may not be impressed by it. I am. I think the science is correct. I think there's a risk we may be wrong about the science. But you know what? Even if there is a risk that we're wrong, it's the only insurance policy we have against it being right is to take action now. So even if countries are skeptics, they are going to be forced to come into line. And that's we're seeing that particularly in America. I'm seeing many people who would still say they think 90% the science is wrong. But even if it's 10% possibly right, then we have to have insurance against it. And that means we have to take huge action. And global warming and everything connected with it happens to be the biggest new market opportunity that you as a conglomerate could possibly be faced with. It doesn't matter where you're looking, whether it's a new process in the production of textiles that uses less water and less energy, whether it's a new process in the aluminium rolling industry, whether it's in telco itself, whether it's in banking and financial services, whether it's in the way that you actually transport your goods and using product exchanges, whatever, however. And on top of that, an unbelievably large and varied opportunity to create new products and services which allow everyone else to save energy. So it's not just a rolling process for aluminium that uses 50% less energy, but it's a technology which you created for that aluminium rolling plant, which happens to be relevant to one of the largest car companies in the world that's using it to roll other products. It could be an innovation in textiles, in the use of chemicals, that has a radical opportunity comes out of it. And you think, hey, this is a product we could sell. And you will see hundreds and hundreds of these things. And, of course, it raises a big question about whether there's opportunities for massive new investment on a much bigger scale than we have seen so far by a conglomerate like this, simply in alternative energies, in energy-saving devices, and just about anything and everything connected with this enormously important trend. And this trend will haunt the whole of the next 35 years of our corporate world. It will affect every single business unit that you can possibly imagine. And even if you operate in a country where the regulations are few, if you're selling up the value chain, you will find that those buying from you are inheriting your carbon footprint, and they have to add your carbon footprint to theirs. It gets welded into their annual report, and then they get slaughtered later on in Bonn or Cologne or Madrid or Brisbane or Shanghai, and also in Delhi. So these things are extremely important. And we will see, I am certain of this, new political alliances at the most senior level between China and India on a whole range of issues which have a moral force about them. And if China and India were to join forces, imagine that authority, to be able to say, we stand here representing almost 3 billion citizens in this world, and our 2 countries plus 1 or 2 other partnerships. And this is the way we think the world should go. This will have a credibility, a moral quality about it, which will command global attention. And I believe you will see these kinds of positionings transform our world. And this takes us on to the final and the most important phase. And we've been in this phase since we started, because wherever you touch the future, it touches values. And the values are about our passions. It's about making a difference, wanting to put something back. And one of the things I love so much about this group is that welded into the genetic code of your founder was this passion for social justice and for transformation. And I know that that is one of the reasons why you attract the best talent, because you are more than just a carbon black company. You're more than just an aluminium rolling or a textile company. You are a socially transforming, responsible, caring, committed, passionate organization that, yes, is absolutely committed to producing a decent return on other people's capital as a moral issue, but also absolutely determined to do it in a way where people go home at night feeling proud to be associated and involved with this great organization. And, that's why I find it, also inspiring. By the way, this is the same value for me. Half of what I do is involved in an AIDS organization, which my wife and I started in 1988. We are active now in 23 countries, including India. In fact, one reason why my wife is here is tomorrow afternoon we will go to visit an orphanage in Thailand. And we will go from there to Hyderabad, where we have a program which is caring for 1,600 men and women with AIDS who are dying, sick and dying right now. And they receive through this center the only free care for those with AIDS, as far as I know, in Hyderabad. So we are also committed, like you are committed, to making a difference, to seeing something put back, to feeling that somehow that life is more than a bottom line. It's fundamental, and out of that, that's linked with your commitment to integrity and the passion that you see. And, I see publicly listed companies all around the world, and they talk the same language, and they talk about growth, profits, and shareholder value, and the speech goes a bit like this. By the way, I often have to follow the chairman or the CEO after such a speech, so I'm always listening very carefully. I'm usually sitting next to someone on the front row, and I'm very conscious of what is going through their minds, whether they are asleep, awake, or doing their BlackBerry. This is the speech, and you tell me what they're doing. Well, I congratulate you. We made our
market cap up by 3.4%.
We confounded the analysts. We increased our market share by 2.7%. And a Happy New Year to all of you, and enjoy your bonus. Thank you very much. And I'm sitting in this chair here, you see. I'm on next, and we've had 3/4 of an hour of this. One sheet of paper after another, one lot of slides after another, one lot of Excel spreadsheet numbers. And I have a problem. You see, I don't think I've ever met anyone who gets out of bed and says, "Oh, thank God I'm alive today. Let's go and make more Excel spreadsheet numbers and bottom line profit and return on equity and shareholder value." Actually, I'm writing a book on such people. Yes, you know I've got a problem. It's the 13th book. Perhaps that's why I'm finding it hard. I don't know. But I cannot find anyone. Hardly anyone. No, that's not true. I do. I find people in family companies that went public where it's almost like a baby. It's us. Yes, I see the passion there. But outside of those things, because, what happens to the chairman of an ordinary, a Ford or an IBM or Microsoft if they don't make their numbers for 3 consecutive quarters? What happens to their careers? So please don't tell me that they have an emotional commitment to the company they were just talking about when the company has no emotional commitment to them. Where is the passion, really? Well, I don't know. But all I know is I'm going to follow this speech. So I'm sitting here, and you see the person on my left, he's been using his BlackBerry for the last 45 minutes. The person on my right is actually snoring. He's asleep. I look over my shoulder, and I see everybody else is using their BlackBerries as well, or they're writing their curriculum vitae to get another job. Meanwhile, the chairman of this multiple company thinks that he's made the speech of his life, and that this is the leadership message which will be taken throughout the world, and wherever these graphs will be shown, the world will be filled with passion and light. How crazy can you get? Well, of course, you know the truth, because your genetic code is so different. You know that people get out of bed for all kinds of reasons, but they don't get out of bed just to make Excel spreadsheet numbers. They get out of bed because there's a problem to solve, there's a challenge to fix, there's something urgent that needs to be done, there's a customer that has a real problem that you care about, that you promised to sort out, your boss needs your help. There's an intellectual fascination in getting it right. There's a scientific challenge here which we can crack together. Because it's a great team, it's a good family, it's an exciting, dynamic environment, because people believe in you, they trust you, and you feel respected and appreciated for who you are. Because when you get out of bed, you feel in some small way that you are able to contribute something significant, something that actually matters. And what's more, you get out of bed for other things. Put your hands up if you had a discussion with someone that you love about balance in your life between work and home and all the other things that you do. Put your hands up if you had a discussion about this issue in the last 6 months. It's a big issue. Because your passions are also not just, even in those things, they are about your family, your children, your sick mother, your father who needs an operation, your cousin who has just dropped out of medical school because he has had a mental breakdown. These things are important to us. So our family and friends, these are passions. And then we have passions for the communities in which we live, the passions for people around us, for issues, for situations. And these things add up to who we are as people. And they come under one big theme, really, which is, of course, it's your underlying value. It's your major slogan, which is that we make life better. We deliver things better. We do it at a better price. We solve your problems. When we say something, we do it. That's our commitment to you. We are passionate about delivering. We do it at a reasonable price. We're not always the cheapest, but we're the best at that price you could possibly get. That slogan of making life better will be the core of every business success. And you know what? Many business schools teach this. They say the purpose of business is to make a profit. Yes, but as we saw before, no one gets out of bed for that. Actually, I happen to think that the purpose of business is something else. You see, every single thing that you have ever sold is sold on the basis of a promise. You know, come to us and I promise you we will deliver the textile that you need on time, every time. In fact, you will not have to hold any stock anymore. We will deliver perfectly. And you won't even have to check the bales or the cartons. You won't even have to count them. You will know our guarantee, what's in the lorry is what you paid for, and it's perfect every time. Right? Hello? Yes! This is what we want. And you know, so therefore what we say is that, I say this, everything that you sell is based on a promise. A product that promises something for the future, or a service that promises something in the future. I don't care whether you sell a chocolate bar, a car, or an aluminium foil. It doesn't make any difference. It's all the same. It's always sold on a promise. And therefore, the purpose of business is simple as far as I'm concerned, which is to deliver on your word. If I sell something to someone, it was quite a difficult negotiation. We did this, we did that. And now I've won it. Now I go back to my friends and say, hey, guess what? I hope I didn't oversell us, but we have actually won this contract now. And now I'm lying awake at night because I know we have to deliver. And therefore, my purpose is to deliver on my promise every single time. And I know that my good friend's job will depend upon it. If I let him down, he will lose his job. Why? Because he also went a long way towards me. He paid over the normal price because I persuaded him that our quality, our assurance, our everything was worth that added value. And so he and I are locked in a contract, which is an ethical bond. I'm going to deliver on my promise, and he has to deliver on his. And together, therefore, that is the purpose for me. And you know what? So few businesses actually do deliver on their promises that if you do every single time, then the community will reward you with the final P. So you have the promise, and then the final thing is the profit. The promise delivers the purpose, and then the purpose, when you deliver on that, gives you your profit. Because I know this, if it was a complicated deal, suppose it was something to do with knowledge management and outsourcing, and I've agreed that I'm going to outsource to you just about every important process in Lloyd's TSB Bank. Wow. And it was a tight deal. There was a lot of negotiation, and you did it on a competitive price to actually get us into the relationship. And after the 3-year contract is up, we're renegotiating, and I already know what's going to happen. I know you're going to put the price up by 30%. Why? Because I know that you discounted it from the start to get us into a relationship, and I also know that you did it better than anybody else, and I wouldn't trust anybody else to do it. And I know that if you deliver it, really deliver it, which you will, that is the right price to pay. And I will pay 15% more than the nearest competitor. Why? Because my life's too short, I want to sleep at night. And what will I do if the system goes down? My whole business will be depending on this. So we get the promise right. We don't overpromise. We promise what we will deliver. That's an ethical issue. When we've made the promise, we work night and day to deliver it exactly as we said we would. In fact, we go further. And when we do, the community rewards us with profit. And that, my friends, gives us purpose in business. What's it all about? It's about making life better. I am passionate about your businesses. I'm passionate about what you do, about your values, and how you do it. I believe you're an incredibly... I wish I could find the right words to express this, what I feel inside. So you just have to believe me even if it doesn't come out right, in simple words. I think you are the most extraordinary organization. I think you are an unstoppable force. I think that there is a dynamism, a global talent pool in this room, which could drive not only these individual businesses forward, but drive you into sectors which are only just thoughts in your imagination. I think that this is a day for extraordinary growth in emerging economies right now, but also a day for exciting partnerships, challenges, and alliances in some of the most developed economies of the world. And I look forward to seeing the next chapters in this extraordinary and inspiring and dynamic story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dixon, for the wonderful, thought-provoking speech today morning. I guess if nothing else, all of us would think twice before we press the left button a second time. But it's been wonderful, and I guess it's wonderful to see how demographics are going to affect businesses going forward. And I guess everyone in this room is going to look at their businesses a little differently from the way they've looked at it all along. We'll now set the floor open for questions. I have a couple with me, but in the meantime, may I request everybody to write down their questions and hand over to the volunteers. The first question I have here is, focus has been the mantra for businesses in the developed world. Where do you see the future for diversified conglomerates like ourselves?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, one of the questions I had when I arrived here, talking with some members of your team last night, was actually a similar one. You know, I mentioned how analysts are busy trying to tear companies to bits, and then they are busy trying to encourage other companies to get put together. And conglomerates have come under pressure. Publicly listed conglomerates have come under pressure because the markets might say, well, you've got a bit of banking here, but how does the banking add value to aluminium rolling? If there is no real added value between the banking expertise and the aluminium expertise, is there any logic in holding them together in the same group? Or would that banking piece have more value in a larger banking group? And would the aluminium piece have a greater value in a much larger aluminium piece? Now, the conglomerate can turn around and say, ah, yes, but you don't know our plans, because we are going to grow a much bigger aluminium piece and a much bigger financial services piece. And then the analyst can still come back and say, yes, now you're the number one aluminium company and one of the number 10 banks, but we might still ask the same question, which is, how do these organizations relate? Do they relate? Do they need to relate? And are the interfaces correct? So I'm not sure necessarily I'm answering your question, but I would say that that is, I think, going to be an issue as this huge, increasingly entrepreneurial, dynamic, expanding universe of companies continues to flourish.
I have one more question here from the audience. What is your view on the business potential at the bottom of the pyramid? How do you think opportunities can be created and realized in that segment?
I'm so pleased you asked about that. I didn't bother to talk about it simply because I thought that this was an area where you are much more expert than I am. So I only offer a humble comment as someone from outside India, where I think this has been developed more than anywhere else. All I can say is that my multinational clients are obsessed with what's happening here at the bottom of the pyramid, and they are all asking the same question, which is, how do we make it work for our own products? They all know the Hindustan Lever story. They know about the fact that Hindustan Lever makes more profit out of its shampoo in 6, 8, 10 mil ampoules now. Pay-as-you-go shampoo rather than the big bottles. And they are now planning, you know, they know about the SMS story where people buy a SIM with only 3 SMSs on it, maybe at a time, and they know about how microloans has now moved into micro insurance, so people are brokering insurance on the back of these products. I think and they also know about other stories, like in Mexico, where people are able to rent the bags of cement. That's a strange concept. Or to buy a bag of cement over a period of months. So you can build your house on a kind of a mortgage, bag by bag. Very interesting idea. But they're all ways in which companies are thinking about allowing low-income people to access huge amounts of their product. And I think we're going to see a vast number of innovative ideas now about these kinds of markets, which are so vast. And I'm not just talking of India. If we were to talk about bottom of the pyramid across the whole of Southeast Asia and Africa as well, it becomes an even more attractive and exciting thing to get right. But I think it's going to be companies that are indigenous, companies that have grown up within emerging economies that will understand these things best. I do not think that bigger multinationals based in America or London are going to get this as easily right as truly Indian or Chinese or Vietnamese or Indonesian companies.
I have this next question from Mr. Prasanna of ABMCL. How do you view the disintegration of the Soviet Union and the formation of the EU through your future prism?
Well, we need to go back. As Winston Churchill said, in order to understand the future, we have to understand the past. The European Union was created as a response to the Second World War to try to prevent the Third World War. Because we had had 2 European wars which spilled out across the whole world in a single generation. And in fact, it was successful in locking France and Germany, in particular, into an economic alliance. And then we saw the collapse of communism. And what's exciting about that, I mean, I travel quite a lot in those territories. I've just come back from Kazakhstan, Belarus, from Ukraine. These countries are all playing big catch-up now with massive infrastructure, huge real estate booms, and economies which are roaring ahead. And Moscow has become as expensive as London, almost, in some ways, almost as expensive as Mumbai, I think, if that is possible. I mean, these countries are all, these big cities are becoming very, very big centers of entrepreneurial business activity. But outside of those big cities are the greatest economic opportunities. If you drive 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 kilometers, if you go on a plane for 1 hour to 2 hours, 3 hours to somewhere like Samara or Togliatti in Russia, you find totally undeveloped territory where there's very little manufacturing, where goods are being transported vast distances by road, where there's logistical nightmares, where the biggest road, motorway, is the width of this platform. You wouldn't believe it, would you? That the main road from Moscow all the way to Samara, across the heart of Russia, is just 2 lanes wide, and if 2 articulated lorries meet each other, they have to go carefully, and there's also holes in the road. You wouldn't believe it, but that's Russia today. So there are massive opportunities in terms of regional development, even if you go to Russia and to Moscow and you think it's all sewn up. And the same is true in Ukraine, especially in countries like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. So I think they're very, very exciting countries. Each one is different. It has a different culture. Some of them are rushing towards the EU. Others are looking back to Moscow. Belarus is looking back towards Moscow. Kiev, half of Kiev, 3/4 of Kiev is looking towards the west. So, very interesting places, fascinating places, I think, for all kinds of alliances for you as a group.
The next question I have is from Dr. Santrup Mishra. This question is, how is the new feature going to impact your business in future, which is making sense of the future?
You have to repeat that question. It's a beautifully crafted question. It's almost philosophical in its approach, yes.
Let me read it again.
Yes.
How is the new future going to impact your business?
My business?
Future.
Oh.
Which is making sense of the future.
Well, the good news is, for me, you see, I'm in a growth market because the future always becomes yesterday. So every day there's another future, which is why I can give away all my intellectual capital. If some of you have been on my website, you'll see that there's 6 entire books published there. There's 100 videos. Probably the video from today will be up there. I don't know if you allow it. In this Wikipedia world, isn't it exciting to give things away? Yeah, you're not sure about that. Actually, it's very exciting. Because some people say, you shouldn't give things away. You know, some speakers don't give their slides away. They don't like to give their books away, and the videos cost $1 million each. And I think, well, if you haven't got much intellectual capital, I suppose you have to hang on to what you have. But if you're an organization like you are, which is constantly investing intellectual capital every day, then you can afford to give away some. And it just goes. So for me, that's what the future is about. It's about giving away ideas. And the best form of praise is when an idea is taken by someone else and used in a slightly different way. Now you say, hey, Patrick, we're manufacturers. We have patents. Of course. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about things like it's your universities. You know, it's whether things are online so that people in the slums of Kolkata can also benefit from some of the learnings that you have created. I'm talking about this kind of spirit of generosity and largesse, which is here inside this room. So that for me is the future. It's constantly listening, learning, keeping up with people like you who are making tomorrow happen. The history makers of tomorrow. It's smelling the air. It's sitting in the cafes on the streets. It's looking and watching people, how they are doing, how they are doing it.
Okay, I think we move on to our economist, Mr. Ajit Ranade. His question is, during 1940s, we had maybe 50 countries. Today, there are more than 200. Will the world break up into smaller nations? What is the future for democracies?
Well, and where does the person live who has made this question?
In Mumbai.
Mumbai. Well, you live, my friend, in the greatest democracy on the earth, and in a nation which, despite internal challenges, I've been to Manipur, for instance, I know the challenges there. I've been to Mizoram, I know the challenges there, but the fact is that you, as a great democratic nation, have the greatest democracy on earth, have held this thing together. Could India break up into 100 countries? Nah, I doubt it. But yet we had the partition. So it keeps us sober and humble and think, well, actually some big things can happen sometimes. Could the UK break up into 4 countries? Most certainly. You know, I don't even know what my country is. It's impossible for me to buy anything online these days. I go looking for U and I can't find UK. I go looking for B, I can't find Britain. I go looking for G, Great Britain, it's not there. Then I find I'm English. So we're already in the process of being broken up by those who design websites. It's interesting. Belgium is in trouble. Belgium has a government which cannot be formed after over 150 days. Why? Because it has 2 communities. They speak different languages. They have different cultures. Could Belgium break up? It's possible. Could the UK break up? It's possible. Would India break up? I don't think it's very likely. Will it federalize some more? For sure. Will Andhra Pradesh government acquire more powers? I am certain. You're obviously from the state. I'm sure. Yes. Local democracy? Yes. Nations, what are they anyway? It's interesting. The more universal we get, the more tribal we become. So we want not just to be a nation, but we want to be a small part of one nation. We want to be our own state. At the same time as want to be our own state, we want to be totally globalized. So we see both these forces operating inside many, many countries right now.
Okay, I guess this is one more which challenges you maybe a bit more. It says, doesn't it make more sense to deal with the change as it happens rather than predicting it? No one could have predicted Google or YouTube.
Yes and no. It depends on what business you're in. If you are in pharmaceuticals, you have to take a 25-year view because it takes 15 years usually, unless you're in generics, to develop something through a pipeline, and then you have to get a return. If you're in the oil industry or mining industry, you have to take a 20-year view because you have to know whether it's even worth drilling the mine. On the other hand, and also, there are many trends which are very obvious. Let me give you an example. There is a pensions crisis in Europe. But how many years have we known about that? For 30 years at least. Why? Because people stopped having babies. If people had carried on having babies normally as in India, we would not have a pensions crisis. So the pensions crisis was created by parenting problems 30 years ago. It was very obvious. Here is another trend for those of you in telecom. I had my first IT startup company in 1978. My first computer ran with 32,000 characters of memory and was powerful enough to run word processing, Excel spreadsheet type activity, and to run a medical practice, medical record system on 32,000 characters of memory. Most of you have in your pocket millions of characters, and the software hardly works, and is slower than the stuff we had then, but that's another story. But in 1978, we knew that the power of the devices we had would go on doubling every 18 months, and that is exactly what has happened, give or take a week. We knew that the cost of telecom would fall towards zero around the world, and it's exactly what has happened. We knew that the price of flying would be likely to go on falling dramatically, and globalization was already there. In fact, you know, a lot is predictable, a lot more predictable than you might think. Even my grandmother was born in 1908 or something, and you know, she knew globalization because she knew actually the old empire was a form of globalization in a way. We had all kinds of global trading systems for 300 or 400 years. That's number one. She knew about global communication. Even in 1931, she could pick up the phone in London and talk to a friend in Delhi. I know she had to ask for a human being to patch the call, and it may take a few minutes, but she was able to talk at the speed of light around the world using electronic impulses. So a lot of things actually she knew about. She didn't know about wireless technology in a mobile phone, but she did know about wireless transmitters from a ship to the shore. She knew that those costs of those things were falling all the time. She could imagine a wireless world. And the internet itself, yes, but actually in 1979, I was already using a form of the internet and already using a form of speech recognition. 1979, on small computers. So although we think many of these things have only suddenly happened and were never able to be foreseen, I don't think that's really true. However, it is true that there's lots of uncertainty. And that's why if you ask Google about the future, they will say they don't know the future. If you ask YouTube the future, they will say they don't know the future. What they'll say is we experiment, we invest, and we allow the community to decide how things will be used. We play, we give lots of different opportunities. We innovate in more than one area. Remember me saying earlier, right at the start, in a rapidly changing world, you have to have more than one strategy. So Google has many strategies for its success. And they are all found on the beta areas of Google. And each one of those is an experiment. And they hope one or two of them will be successful. So I think we need to do both. Every company, every business unit here spends serious time thinking about the future. You have to. You're thinking about what your competitors are going to do tomorrow. You think about what other technologies are happening in other industries that you could bring into your own industry. You're thinking about whether you're going to win the war for talent. You're constantly thinking about generating the next layer of leadership. You are in the business of managing the future. That's what leadership is. And yet, we also, I agree, need to understand the uncertainty of it and build in all kinds of flexibilities in the process.
So I guess that's not a choice. All of us have to do it. The one who gets it right does it better. The next question is from Procyon Mukherjee from Hindalco. It's relating to the environment. He says, if the world aspires to read newspapers like the Americans do, all the trees of the world have to be felled. Do you think the future would be as peaceful as we imagine it to be? Or are there going to be conflicts that have to be managed through partnerships?
We're talking about conflicts in relation to the environment, is that right? Particularly here. Yeah. Yes? I think that the worries we have about the environment and how we share the resources of the world is a moral question and one that will become very political. It is already. For some time, I have been concerned about water conflict. It can easily happen. You have long rivers that go through more than one country. Maybe you know that in Uganda, the Ugandan government suddenly turned off the River Nile by 30%. Did you know that? In one single day, they just turned off the tap. So Sudan was suddenly missing 30% of its water, and so was Egypt. There was no consultation. There is a 1921 act, an international treaty, which binds these countries together to not interfere with each other's water. And they violated it. Okay, Egypt has a dam and Sudan just sat there. But you can imagine, in a different kind of situation, that it would not take too much like that to start an international conflict. Because someone would say, we have to send in an army to take control of the gates of that dam as part of our national interest. And we have seen wars start over less in the past. So I think that we do have the potential for conflict, that's true. And the most serious conflicts may actually not even be warlike. They may be more economic, political, chaotic. One thing, for me, the trees cannot solve global warming challenges. You can plant 5 billion trees and they suck carbon out for a few years and then they fall over. When they fall over, they put their carbon straight back into the air again. If we have too much carbon dioxide around, it's because we have released sticky stuff that has stored carbon under the earth for tens of millions of years. And there's only one safe place for that carbon, which is to take it back, put it back down. Can we do it? Yes, we can. The technology is there already. We could put a cap on many power stations and capture up to 90% of the carbon coming out of them at relatively low cost. It would increase the cost of retail electricity by only 20% in the European Union, and it's already starting. And it's an example. This is what we call carbon capture technology, and it's an example of a whole range of technologies that we're going to see in the future. But the real battle and the real tension in our world will not be just to try to find a way of balancing our carbon footprint together in a way which allows economic development in a just way and puts some constraints, serious constraints, on the developed world which produced most of the carbon in the first place and now have a moral duty to sort out their own consumption problems without totally stifling economic development and a carbon revolution in places like India. But in the middle of all of that, we will find the attention begins to turn of the world, not just from carbon saving and carbon capture and how are we going to balance these things, but it will turn slowly but surely to a huge new investment, not just in solar and wind and waves, but in the next generation of nuclear, which is not the usual fission reactors, which produce so much radioactive waste and potential for terrorist abuse. Entire hotel to be powered with the chemicals from 3 mobile phones and a whole load of seawater for 2 years. Just those chemicals with very little waste. Could we do it? You bet we could. If we put even a fraction of the $1 trillion that the United States and other countries spends on military spending each year into solving this issue of international security, then I think we'll find a solution very quickly. At the moment, the total investment in cold fusion technology is not $1 trillion. It's $6 billion. And that's the problem. So we have, 100 years ago, we hardly knew how to light a light bulb. Electricity had only just been discovered, really. The combustion engine was still just in its infancy. And you think that technology and knowledge is doubling every 3 months in terms of its power. That's amazing. And you think what we will know about our world in 30 years' time, it's beyond comprehension compared to where we are today. So I am certain that we could apply even just the ingenuity from the scientists in this room to find some solutions to these problems if we had enough budget to do it.
Okay, next question is again something which we all keep asking. This is from Mr. Shailendra Jain. How do you look at dilemma between consumerism and sustainability in the future?
Well, I think this is related to the other question, isn't it? Which is, it's a fundamental issue. We have 1 billion children which are growing up. How are we to satisfy their needs when they see your lifestyles on a flashed, even if they don't own a TV, they walk past a bar and they see a bit of your lifestyles and they see their lifestyles, and most of these 1 billion children are living on $1 a day. They see my lifestyle, They see a middle-class lifestyle. And it creates a demand. Can that demand be met? Can economic growth always be worshipped as the ideal? Those are huge questions, and I don't have the answers to those. All I know is this, that there are some people who think in terms of apocalypse and disaster. I'm not one of those. I do happen to think that there are some resources that are limited, but there's an awful lot that are relatively unlimited. Let's assume for a moment that we could, within the next 50 to 70 years, solve the energy problem profoundly and permanently. I'm not saying it would be free. It might be quite expensive, but we can solve it. Let's suppose, too, that we stop burning carbon and we start using it for chemicals and plastics and things like that. We just use carbon mainly to make things, and that we capture the things that we've made and we recycle them. If we were to do that, we would have an almost unlimited store of carbon for a long time. The other interesting thing is, if you do have free energy, you can convert energy into carbon. Why? Because you suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, you collect it. You don't even have to grow it from trees. You can collect it, and you can change carbon dioxide into oil, you can change it into coal-like substances, you can change it into gas, just from the gas in the air. And you might say, yes, it's expensive. Yeah, it is expensive using today's technology. So is the world going to be short of carbon? No. Solve the energy problem, and you have solved the carbon problem in the long term. What about things like aluminium? You know that there's an almost infinite source of aluminium. What about copper? Oh, now there's a problem. You know that the proven copper reserves have hardly increased at all in the last 30 years. Isn't that correct? Maybe because we haven't bothered to look too hard, but if you think that every single year the number of the proven barrels of oil has gone up faster than the oil we've used. That's interesting. Copper, stationary. So copper we're short of. Copper could be a very prized commodity within the next 20 years because it is so fundamental to our electronics revolution. We might find ourselves having to use a lot more aluminium as a conductor rather than copper. That's an interesting scenario. But what about other commodities? Steel we got plenty of. We're not going to run out of iron ore. Are we going to run out of gold? Well, it could be in short supply, but we should be able to recycle it. Gold, copper, as I say, is a shortage. Aluminium, no. Cement, are we going to run out of cement? No way. Are we going to run out of sand? No. Are we going to run out of granite? I doubt it. So, water, yes. Huge water shortages, and nothing now to do about global warming. It's just the fact that we are short of water because we're so greedy at using water as we become more affluent. But you know what? Solve the energy problem, and we've solved the water problem. Why? Because you turn seawater into water. So you start to come back to the energy issue as fundamental to the sustainability question. Is there enough land to feed everyone? Oh, for sure. We know that there is. We could get double the yield out of the land that's already under cultivation. So we know we can feed people well. And if we had any problem with food, you know what we needed to do? Try and convert people to stop eating meat. Because meat is one of the most inefficient ways to use food and land whatsoever. Because so little of the grain that is given to an animal is turned into biomass. If you eat it directly, you save a huge chunk in the food chain. So food, I'm not sure we're short of. Energy, we could be sorted if we put our minds to it. Carbon, I think we could sort that one. Water, then gets sorted. Most of the other commodities, well, I think we'd find a way around. So could we actually have a world where most people in China could drive a car? Yes. Would it be burning carbon? No. Will it be burning hydrogen? Probably. Would the hydrogen be coming from coal? No. From nuclear? Yes. So it's possible, but we will have to find a much more, a stronger international consensus about the way forward to achieve these things.
I guess that gives us a lot of assurance for the next generation. Everybody would be much more happier and safer about their children.
I hope so.
The next question is from Mr. Dilip Gaur from Alexandria Carbon Black. He asks, given the fact that emotions will shape the future, Do we need to organize our boards, companies, businesses differently? More emphasis on softer skills? And do you have any tips for him?
I think that you already are. I think that you are, compared to some multinationals I work with, I think that you are very culturally sensitive. I think you are, in the whole way in which you lead, you look to connect with passion and values. I think these things are strong, and I'm certain that this is one of the reasons why you continue to score so high for engagement and for customer and staff loyalty. So yes, you can only go further in this direction. It is absolutely the way to go. And the interesting thing is that history has shown us that as your workforce becomes more educated and more affluent, they become softer in what they are looking for. If you are, as an individual, you are first generation in university. If your cousins and aunts and uncles have paid for you to become a doctor, let us say, and you finally have become a physician, you are the first doctor that has ever been known in the whole of that family tree. It is a cause for the whole of that community to celebrate, and they will look for you to be helping them economically and in an appropriate way. And you would consider it your duty to do that, your moral duty to do that. Not only to repay, but to be a blessing to the family at points of great need and crisis. And I promise you this, such an individual is not likely to be talking about work-life balance. I'm exaggerating a little. But if you are second or third generation, your grandfather was a university professor, your mother was a lawyer, your father also was a very successful businessman, and you inherited part share of the business. You know, that generation, if it's your child now growing up, your child is the person who's thinking at the age of 23, he's saying, I'm thinking of downsizing and getting a life. You're thinking, downsizing at the age of 23? You're still at university, my friend. Because this is a different generation. And they are thinking differently, and they are feeling much more soft about many of these things. And they're much more looking for purpose and meaning at work than perhaps the first generation through, who are prepared to live and almost die for just to get there, to succeed, to get in there and make it happen. And I've seen that over and over again in many, many of the countries where we work.
Okay, I guess we have many questions, but last couple of questions for Doctor. This is from Ms. Obe Ziegner from Novellus, Germany. She asks, what do you think should be done by global businesses to reduce the divide between rich and poor across the world, particularly to support the third world countries?
What should be done by multinationals to reduce the inequality? Well, you know what? I said that half of my life is involved in a humanitarian foundation which is looking to do just that, because one of the things that AIDS does is it creates inequality. AIDS is a disease which spreads through ignorance and through fear, misunderstanding, and broken relationships. It destroys families by removing the breadwinners, so the children grow up very poor. And yet, with my medic hat on, I see that. But with my business hat on, I see something different. And the truth is this, that as you know, economic growth in the last 5 years has lifted more people out of absolute poverty in places like Kolkata or Shanghai or Myanmar or wherever else, lifted more people out of absolute poverty and indeed relative poverty in Eastern Europe, in places like Russia, in Ukraine, and places like that. It's economic growth which is paying the pensioners their pensions after the chaos of the breakup of the Soviet Union. It's not government policy. It's businesses that are generating taxes and wealth. It's capital growth. It's the value of property increasing. So older people are finding that they actually have equity in their homes. They're releasing a bit of that so the next generation can buy their houses. And so the wealth is being spread across the whole community. So the short answer to your question is that actually trade itself doing the agreements, traveling to countries where there are large labor pools of perhaps relatively unskilled, poorly paid people that can be trained by your organization, invested in a socially responsible way. So we're also educating their children. We're providing some basic health care. It's packages of support. And these things, more than anything, will drive economic growth. As I often say, I'm often criticized in Europe for some of the things I say about outsourcing. And they say, oh, you know, you're destroying the jobs of people in Bristol. And I say, well, I don't think that's true. If you want the world to actually turn more smoothly, then this is a mighty force for good change. Because for every job that is lost in Bristol, every job that is outsourced to Hyderabad, as you know, we create perhaps another 50 to 100 jobs which are somehow going to benefit from that single job. We know that $100 put into the pay packet of someone in Hyderabad gets spent up to 100 times in a month. 3 rupees goes to buy, I don't know, a small number of rupees goes to buy an SMS from a woman who's sitting on the ground with her 3-year-old child. She's selling the SIM card. And you know that within 1 hour, she has taken those rupees and she's spent them in the market to buy rice. And you know within another 3 hours, the person who's received the money for rice has gone to pay the landlord his rent. And so the money goes spinning round. And we know that one of the real engines that happens in a country like India or Indonesia or Thailand, it comes through the outsourcing, the offshoring, and the rest. And out of this buzz, this entrepreneurial dynamism grows, and more goods and services get bought, and some of it comes back to the Western countries as well in terms of increased demand for products and services. So for me, globalization, which sometimes can bring its own problems, but globalization has this capacity, I believe, to produce economic growth which will solve many, many of these social challenges. In the meantime, it's very, very important that as corporations operating globally, that we understand very sensitively the environments that we're in, and we tread carefully and with respect.
The last question for the session from Rituraj Shah from Thai Acrylic Fiber. Do you agree that emotional engagement is actually dying each day with high aspirations of individuals and unlimited opportunities? If so, is this not a big challenge? And what should organizations do to address this?
Can you read that question again?
Okay. Do you agree that emotional engagement is actually dying each day with high aspirations of individuals and unlimited opportunities available to them? If so, is this not a big challenge? What should organizations do?
Emotional engagement is extremely important. We know that. And I'm sure the Gallup surveys of 30 million executives on which these engagement scores, these so-called engagement scores, have been built. And I know that you score very, very highly on these. And you know all about it. We know that when people identify with the mission of the organization, when they like the team that they're in, when they feel proud of the values, when they go home at night with a good feeling inside, when they feel like bringing their best friends into the same organization, then we know that this is so strongly correlated with customer satisfaction, staff retention, low sickness, all the metrics, the productivity of the team, the cost structure of the team, the profitability of the team. And you can measure these things year by year, and you can see as engagement scores go up even 3 or 4%, customer satisfaction goes up 10%, profitability 5%. And actually, one of the things which can most change this is just by dealing with 1 or 2 of the people who are the least engaged. And then the score can come really up. Because often it's just 1 or 2 that are pulling the whole team down. So it's really very important. I think one of the challenges, though, and perhaps we're going to hear more about this, I'm sure we will after lunch, when we talk about how to lead without having to lead by, this is my job, you do what I say because I'm your line manager. That's a terrible way to lead. But when we learn how to lead out of who we are, when we find that people follow us just because they trust us, they sense that we know where we're going, and they actually want to get there as well. They really like where we're going. That itself produces engagement. It's that kind of leadership produces engagement. The sort of leadership that doesn't is you will do what I say because I'm your boss. The kind of video I showed earlier, that's a disengagement leadership. It's the leadership of punishment, it's the leadership of fear, it's the leadership of insecurity, and the leadership of crisis management. But real, strong, sustainable leadership is of this very, very different character. It enhances the spirit. It makes one feel good to be alive. It makes one feel respected and honored as a person. It makes one feel that one can develop and that one has a future oneself. And leadership like that understands that you are a whole person, that you have maybe a wife, you have children, you have other thoughts other than the business, and that your life as a whole, you are perhaps a spiritual person as well, that we understand all of what you are, all of your own personal universe is important to you. And if we can connect with all of that, you know, I often say this, and perhaps to finish with this, the lesson of history is this: if you can learn how to connect with all the passions in the human heart, then people will follow you to the ends of the earth as a leader. They will buy your products and services with pride. They will lay down their very lives. They will sell what you do to all their friends without you having to pay them a penny. And what is more, and we know this from the non-government voluntary area of work, from the philanthropic areas, which you know so much about, they may even be willing to work for you for almost nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dixon. I think this has been 2 hours of everybody is totally glued on to what you were saying. And I guess you've given some answers in the last half an hour, but probably left people with more questions to answer themselves later on. And a lot of information and, I guess, further questions to dwell upon. Thank you very much.